They broke you, life hit you, and it hit you hard. People betrayed you, circumstances crushed you, and somewhere along the way, you started believing that broken was your permanent state. But here's what they never told you. The most dangerous men in history were not born powerful. They were forged by destruction. Machiavelli himself didn't write his greatest work from a throne. He wrote it from exile, humiliated, stripped of everything, forced to his knees by the very system he once served. And yet, the prince became the most feared blueprint for power the world has ever known. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. Because broken men who refuse to stay broken become something the world has no category for. Something it cannot predict, cannot manipulate, and cannot stop. Today, I'm giving you 7 lessons. Not motivation, not comfort. These are surgical truths hidden inside Machiavelli's philosophy, used by history's most untouchable figures. Men who turned their lowest moments into their greatest weapons. If you're ready to stop being a victim of your own story and start becoming the architect of your own power, drop King in the comments right now. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Pain is your greatest teacher. Here is the first thing Machiavelli understood that most men never will. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is your most honest teacher, your most loyal advisor, and your most powerful weapon. If you learn to use it correctly. Every man who has ever risen to real power, real influence, and real freedom did not rise despite his suffering. He rose because of it. The fire that was meant to destroy him became the very thing that hardened him into something unbreakable. Most men, when life hits them, do one of 2 things. They collapse completely, drowning themselves in self-pity, replaying their failures like a broken record, letting the wound define the man. Or they run, numbing the pain with distractions, with noise, with anything that keeps them from sitting alone with the truth. But Machiavelli's hidden law says something different entirely. It says, sit in it, don't flinch, don't escape. Look directly at what broke you and ask the one question weak men are too afraid to ask. What is this teaching me? Because pain, when studied instead of avoided, reveals your blind spots. It exposes the people who were never truly loyal. It strips away every illusion you were comfortable hiding behind. It forces you to see reality with a cold, clear eye. And that clarity, that brutal self-awareness, is the very foundation that every powerful man is built upon. Machiavelli wrote that a wise man must always choose the path of necessity, not comfort. Pain is necessity. It is the universe stripping away everything that was keeping you weak, everything that was keeping you small, everything that was keeping you from becoming who you were always capable of being. So stop mourning what broke you. Start studying it. Your breakdown was never the ending. It was always the blueprint. Lesson 2. Silence is your most powerful weapon. Now listen carefully, because this lesson alone, if you truly master it, will make you the most powerful person in every room you ever walk into. Machiavelli understood something about silence that the modern world has completely forgotten. He understood that the man who controls his tongue controls his fate. In a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, desperate to be validated, desperate to explain themselves at every turn, your silence becomes something rare, something intimidating, something that forces the people around you to question themselves before they ever question you. Most men talk too much. They reveal their plans before they execute them. They expose their wounds to people who secretly celebrate them. They argue when they should observe. They explain when they should withdraw. And they beg for understanding from the very people who are studying them for weaknesses. This is how ordinary men stay ordinary, but the Machiavellian mind operates differently. It understands that every word you speak is information you are voluntarily surrendering. Every reaction you show is a map you are handing your enemies. Every time you feel the urge to defend yourself, to justify yourself, to prove yourself to someone who has already decided what they think of you, you are giving away power that you can never recover. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. Silence is the armor that no blade can penetrate. When you stop explaining yourself, people start doubting themselves. When you stop reacting, people start losing control. When you move in stillness and speak only when your words carry absolute purpose, you stop being someone people can read, manipulate, or predict. And an unpredictable man is an untouchable man. Machiavelli wrote that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. So a wise man must be both. Silence is how you become the fox. It is how you see the trap before it closes. It is how you study every player in the room while revealing nothing about yourself. So from this moment forward, let your stillness speak louder than any word ever could. Let your silence be the most powerful statement you have ever made. Master this, and watch how quickly the entire dynamic of your life begins to shift in your favor. Before we go further, drop Silent King in the comments right now. Show me you understand the power of this lesson. Let's keep going. Lesson 3. Master your emotions, or they will master you. This is where most men fall apart. Not in battle, not under pressure, not when life strips them down to nothing. They fall apart from the inside because they never learn to govern the one territory that matters more than any external kingdom they could ever conquer: their own mind, their own emotions, their own internal world. And until that world is disciplined, structured, and coldly controlled, everything they build on the outside will eventually collapse because the foundation beneath it is unstable. Machiavelli was ruthlessly clear on this point. He understood that a ruler who is governed by his emotions is not a ruler at all. He is a puppet, and the strings are being pulled by whoever knows how to provoke him, how to flatter him, how to make him react before he has time to think. This is not ancient history. This is happening to men every single day. A man loses his temper in an argument and destroys a relationship he spent years building. A man lets jealousy cloud his judgment and makes a decision that sets him back a decade. A man lets fear paralyze him at the exact moment that action would have changed his entire trajectory. Emotion, unchecked and undisciplined, is the most effective weapon your enemies will ever use against you. And the most devastating part is that they don't even have to fire it themselves. They simply create the conditions and you detonate on your own. The Machiavellian man understands this trap completely, and he refuses to fall into it. He trains himself to pause where others react. He trains himself to observe where others explode. He develops the rare and terrifying ability to feel the full weight of an emotion: anger, humiliation, grief, betrayal, and choose deliberately and consciously how he responds to it. Not suppression, not denial, mastery. There is a critical difference between a man who feels nothing and a man who feels everything but is controlled by nothing. The first is numbness. The second is power. Stoic philosophy taught that you cannot control what happens to you, but you hold absolute dominion over how you interpret it, how you respond to it, and what you choose to do with it. Machiavelli took that principle and sharpened it into a blade. He understood that the man who masters his emotional state masters his circumstances, because perception shapes reality, and the man who controls his perception controls the narrative of his own life. When someone tries to humiliate you and you respond with stillness, you win. When someone betrays you and instead of collapsing, you recalibrate coldly and strategically, you win. When life deals you the worst possible hand and instead of breaking, you use that pressure to compress yourself into something harder, something denser, something more dangerous, you win every single time. So stop wearing your emotions on your sleeve like a target. Stop letting your reactions tell people exactly how to hurt you. Start treating your emotional discipline as the highest form of personal power, because it is. The man who cannot be provoked cannot be defeated, and the man who cannot be defeated becomes exactly what this world fears most. Drop Emotionless King in the comments right now if this lesson is hitting different. This is the level of self-mastery we're building here on Machiavellian Mind. Let's keep going. Lesson 4. Choose your circle like your life depends on it, because it does. There is a law operating silently in your life right now that most men never become conscious of until it has already cost them everything. It is the law of proximity. And it states, with cold and absolute precision, that you will become the average of the people you allow into your closest circle. Not similar to them, not influenced by them, you will become them. Their ceiling will become your ceiling. Their mediocrity will become your mediocrity. Their limited thinking, their fear of greatness, their comfort with smallness, it will seep into you so gradually, so quietly, that you won't even notice it happening until one day you look in the mirror and realize the man staring back at you has shrunk, has settled, has accepted a life he was never supposed to accept. Machiavelli understood the lethal danger of the wrong counsel more deeply than almost any philosopher before or after him. He dedicated entire chapters of The Prince to the art of choosing advisors, warning that a ruler surrounded by flatterers, men who tell him what he wants to hear rather than what he needs to hear, is a ruler already walking toward his own destruction. Because flattery is poison dressed as loyalty. It feels good in the moment and kills you slowly over time. The men around you who celebrate every decision you make without question, who never challenge you, who never push back, who clap for your mediocrity as loudly as they would clap for your greatness. These men are not your allies. They are your anchors. They are keeping you comfortable in a harbor you were always meant to leave. And then there are the other kind, the energy vampires, the silent saboteurs, the ones who smile at your face and quietly resent your progress in their hearts. Machiavelli called them the most dangerous of all because their betrayal doesn't announce itself. It moves in shadows. It operates through subtle undermining, through planting seeds of self-doubt, through being conveniently absent at the exact moments you need support and conveniently present when you stumble. These people must be identified with cold, clear eyes and removed from your inner world without guilt, without lengthy explanation, and without looking back. Because here is what the Machiavellian philosophy demands of you. It demands ruthless discernment. It demands that you evaluate every relationship not through the lens of history or sentiment or loyalty to what once was, but through the lens of what that person is actively contributing to the man you are becoming. Does their presence make you sharper? Does their energy push you forward? Does their honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, make you better? If the answer is yes, protect that relationship with everything you have, because men like that are rarer than any resource on this earth. But if the answer is no, if their presence drains you, dims you, distracts you, or quietly pulls you back toward the version of yourself you are trying to escape, then you owe them nothing. Not your time, not your energy, not your future. The coldest truth Machiavelli ever delivered was this: a prince who is not wise himself cannot be well advised by others. In other words, the quality of your circle begins with the quality of your own standards. Raise your standards for yourself, for your time, for who earns access to your energy, and watch how rapidly the entire landscape of your life begins to transform. Because you are not just choosing friends. You are choosing your future. You are choosing your ceiling. You are choosing the man you will be 5 years from now. Choose with the precision of a general selecting his finest soldiers. Choose with the coldness of a strategist who understands that every resource is finite and every decision carries a cost. And never, not for comfort, not for nostalgia, not for the fear of being alone, never compromise that standard again. Right now, drop Elite Circle in the comments. If you're watching this and you know it's time to audit your circle, let me know. The men building real power are in the comments section. Let's keep going. Lesson 5. Never reveal your next move. Let your results speak without warning. There is a mistake that destroys more potential greatness than failure ever could, more than bad timing, more than lack of resources, more than any external obstacle the world could place in your path. And that mistake is this: announcing yourself before you have arrived, telling people your plans before you have executed them, seeking validation for a vision that hasn't materialized yet, sharing your dreams with people who don't yet have the evidence to believe in you, and handing them the exact ammunition they need to discourage you, doubt you, and plant seeds of hesitation inside the one mind that needs to remain unshakable, your own. Machiavelli understood this with devastating clarity. He observed princes, generals, and rulers across centuries and identified a pattern that separated those who conquered from those who collapsed. The ones who conquered moved in silence. They planned in private. They endured in darkness. And then, without announcement, without warning, without seeking anyone's approval or preparation, they arrived. And by the time the world understood what had happened, it was already done. This is not just strategy. This is psychology at the highest level. Because when you announce your intentions prematurely, you create a dangerous dynamic. You invite opinions you haven't asked for. You open the door to criticism before you have the results to silence it. You give your competition, and make no mistake, there is always competition, a clear view of your trajectory, your timeline, and your vulnerabilities. But when you move in silence, something entirely different happens. You preserve your energy because you are not spending it defending a vision to people who can't yet see it. You protect your momentum because doubt, especially the doubt of people you respect, is one of the most effective momentum killers in existence. And you build something far more powerful than hype. You build proof. Understand this. The world does not reward intention. It does not celebrate potential. It does not bow to promises. The world responds to results, and results alone. A man who talks about what he is going to do occupies a very different position in the minds of others than a man who simply does it and then lets the outcome speak on his behalf. One inspires mild interest, the other commands absolute respect. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But what he embedded between those lines was an even deeper truth. That fear, real fear, the kind that makes powerful men take you seriously, is never generated by words. It is generated by demonstrated capability, by consistent, undeniable action, by the pattern of a man who says little, moves deliberately, and delivers without fail every single time. This is the identity you are building. Not the man who performs his journey for an audience, not the man who needs the approval of his timeline validated by others, but the man who disappears into his work, into his discipline, into his vision with such singular and relentless focus that when he finally emerges, transformed, elevated, and operating on a level that those around him can barely comprehend, there are no words necessary. Because the results have already spoken. They have already silenced every doubt, every criticism, every person who smiled at your struggle and privately predicted your failure. And that silence, the silence of a world forced to witness what you have built, is the most eloquent and devastating statement a man can ever make. So close the chapter on seeking permission. Stop rehearsing your potential for an audience that hasn't earned the right to witness your process. Go dark. Go deep. Go to work with a ferocity and a focus that the world around you cannot yet understand. Build in the shadows, sacrifice in the silence. And when the time comes, and it will come, let your arrival be the only announcement you ever needed to make. Because the most powerful entrance a man can make is the one nobody saw coming. Drop silent moves in the comments right now if you understand why the most dangerous men move without warning. This is the Machiavellian code. This is how untouchable men operate. Let's keep building. Lesson 6. Strategic patience. The weapon that destroys every enemy without a single confrontation. In a world addicted to instant gratification, where every man wants results yesterday, where attention spans have collapsed and patience has become almost extinct, the man who masters the art of waiting becomes the most dangerous force in any environment he occupies. Not because he is passive, not because he is weak, not because he lacks the fire or the capability to act, but because he understands something that the impulsive, the reactive, and the emotionally driven will never grasp that timing is not just a component of strategy. Timing is the strategy, and the man who controls his timing controls his destiny with a precision that no amount of raw talent or brute force can ever replicate. Machiavelli studied this principle with the obsessive attention of a man who had lost everything by moving too soon and rebuilding everything by learning to wait. He watched rulers destroy decades of careful positioning in a single moment of impatience. He observed generals throw away strategic advantages because they couldn't tolerate the discomfort of holding still while the perfect moment assembled itself. And he arrived at a conclusion that became one of the most powerful threads running through his entire philosophy. That fortune favors the bold, yes, but fortune sustains only the patient. Because boldness without patience is recklessness. It is energy without direction. It is fire without architecture. It burns everything, including the man wielding it. But patience combined with boldness. Patience that is active, calculated, and intentional rather than passive or fearful. That combination produces something the world has no defense against. It produces the man who strikes only when victory is already guaranteed, who moves only when the moment has ripened to the point where resistance has become nearly impossible, who conserves his energy with the cold discipline of a predator who understands that one perfectly timed strike is infinitely more effective than 100 premature ones. Most men, when they feel wronged, want to respond immediately. When they feel overlooked, they want to force their way into relevance. When they feel the pressure of circumstances closing in, they panic and move. Not because the moment is right, but because the discomfort of stillness has become unbearable. And this is precisely where they hand their power to forces they could have defeated entirely if only they had waited. Understand what strategic patience actually is, because it is widely misunderstood. It is not resignation. It is not surrender. It is not the passive acceptance of circumstances you have the power to change. Strategic patience is the disciplined act of refusing to let your emotions dictate your timeline. It is the ability to sit in discomfort, in uncertainty, in the tension of an unresolved situation, and remain clear-headed enough to recognize that the moment has not yet arrived, and that forcing it will cost you more than waiting for it ever could. It is the ice beneath the surface of a composed exterior. Cold, structural, holding everything together while the world above it remains completely unaware of the strength beneath. Machiavelli observed that the Romans never allowed a problem to persist in order to avoid a war because they understood that delay only advantages the enemy. But he also taught something equally critical on the other side of that coin, that the prince who cannot read the season of his moment, who cannot distinguish between the time to strike and the time to observe, will find himself perpetually fighting battles he could have avoided entirely and missing victories that were assembling themselves just beyond his impatience. Strategic patience gives you the power of foresight. It gives you the ability to see 3 moves ahead while your opponents are still reacting to the move you made yesterday. It positions you above the chaos, above the noise, above the emotional turbulence of men who cannot control their own timelines. And from that elevated position, you begin to see patterns that are completely invisible to those still operating at ground level. You begin to understand that most conflicts resolve themselves without your direct intervention if you simply withhold your reaction long enough. You begin to recognize that the opportunities most men miss are missed, not because they weren't present, but because impatience caused them to look away at the critical moment. And you begin to develop the rarest and most lethal quality a powerful man can possess, the absolute unshakable certainty that your time is coming, that your moment is assembling, and that nothing, not doubt, not pressure, not the noise of people moving faster than you, in directions that don't matter, nothing will cause you to compromise the integrity of your timing. So make peace with the waiting. Make peace with the process. Make peace with the fact that the most powerful version of you is not built in a moment of inspiration. It is built in 10,000 moments of disciplined patience, where you chose to hold your position when every instinct screamed at you to move. That is where kings are made. Not in the moments of action the world gets to witness, but in the silent, grueling, invisible moments of restraint that nobody ever sees and everybody eventually feels. Drop "patient king" in the comments right now if you understand that the most powerful move is sometimes the one you don't make. Strategic patience is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. We are almost at the final lessons. Stay with me. Lesson 7. Reinvent yourself completely. Burn the old version and rise without apology. There comes a moment in every man's life, a specific, defining, irreversible moment, where he is faced with the most important decision he will ever make. Not a career decision, not a financial decision, not a decision about where to live, or who to love, or what path to pursue. The decision I am talking about is more fundamental than any of those. It is the decision to either remain loyal to the version of himself that circumstances, people, and pain have constructed around him like a prison, or to look at that version with cold, clear, ruthless eyes, recognize it for exactly what it is, and burn it to the ground without hesitation, without ceremony, and without a single backward glance. Machiavelli understood that the greatest leaders in history were not men who remained consistent. They were men who were willing to transform completely when the moment demanded it. He wrote that the wise man adapts himself to circumstances the way water adapts to the shape of its container. Not because he is weak or without form, but because the ability to shift, to reinvent, to shed the identity that no longer serves the mission is itself the highest form of strategic intelligence. Most men are imprisoned not by their circumstances, but by their self-concept, by the story they have been told about who they are, what they deserve, what is possible for someone with their background, their failures, their history. They carry the weight of every mistake they have ever made like a chain around their potential, dragging it into every new situation, every new opportunity, every new version of their life that could have been different if only they had been willing to let go. They remain the man who was betrayed because betrayal became their identity. They remain the man who failed because failure became their most comfortable excuse. They remain the man who was broken because broken is familiar, and familiar, no matter how painful, always feels safer than the terrifying, exhilarating unknown of becoming someone the world has never seen before. But the Machiavellian philosophy offers no comfort to the man who chooses the prison of his past over the power of his potential. It is ruthlessly forward-facing. It demands that you assess yourself with the same cold objectivity you would apply to any strategic situation, identifying what is working, eliminating what is not, and rebuilding with the precision and intentionality of an architect who has studied every flaw in the original structure and is now constructing something that cannot be broken in the same way twice. Reinvention is not betrayal of who you were. It is the highest form of loyalty to who you are capable of becoming. It is the acknowledgement that growth is not linear, that the man you need to be tomorrow cannot be reached by the man you are today without a fundamental restructuring of identity, belief, and behavior. So shed the outdated narrative. Retire the limiting beliefs that were installed in you by people who had already given up on their own greatness. Release the relationships, the habits, the environments, and the internal dialogues that are architected for a version of you that no longer exists and was never worthy of you to begin with. Rise without explanation, rise without seeking the understanding of people who were comfortable with your limitations because your limitations made them feel better about their own. Rise with the cold, quiet, unshakable confidence of a man who has looked into the fire that was meant to destroy him, and chosen, deliberately and completely, to become something that fire could never have anticipated. Because the most unstoppable force in this world is not a man who was never broken. It is the man who was broken completely, who sat in the ruins of everything he thought he was, and rebuilt himself into something so much more powerful, so much more precise, so much more intentional, that the world that broke him can no longer recognize him. And that man, that reborn, restructured, fully reinvented man, answers to no version of his past ever again. Drop Reborn King in the comments right now if you have decided, truly decided, that the old version of you is done. That chapter is closed. What's being built now is something different entirely. Let's finish strong. Last part. The final truth. The untouchable man. We have covered 7 lessons, 7 surgical truths pulled from the depths of Machiavellian philosophy and dark psychology. 7 principles that history's most powerful, most feared, and most unstoppable men understood at a level that separated them permanently from the ordinary world around them. But now, before we close, I need to give you something that sits beneath all 7 of those lessons. Something that holds them together like a spine holds a body upright. Because without this final truth, the lessons are just words, and words without a foundation are nothing more than noise. The final truth is this: becoming untouchable is not an event. It is not a destination you arrive at after completing a checklist. It is not a reward handed to you at the end of a difficult season. It is a decision. A daily, deliberate, unrelenting decision to operate from a place of such complete internal sovereignty that the external world, its chaos, its cruelty, its opinions, its betrayals, its failures and its noise, loses its ability to define you, destabilize you, or determine the direction of your life. Machiavelli's deepest and most misunderstood teaching was never about manipulation. It was never about ruthlessness for the sake of ruthlessness. At its core, his philosophy was about one thing above everything else: the cultivation of a mind so disciplined, so strategically aware, so completely governed from within rather than from without, that circumstances become tools rather than obstacles, and people become information rather than threats. The untouchable man is not the man without enemies. He has enemies, because any man worth becoming will always attract opposition from those who are threatened by what he represents. The untouchable man is not the man without pain. He feels it, deeply, completely, and without flinching away from its full weight. The untouchable man is not the man without failure. He has failed, perhaps more catastrophically, more publicly, and more painfully than most men around him. What makes him untouchable is none of those things. What makes him untouchable is that none of those things have the final word. His enemies sharpen him. His pain instructs him. His failures restructure him. And through every single one of those experiences, he remains the author of his own narrative, never the victim of someone else's. This is what you are building, not a performance of strength, not an image of power projected outward to impress people who don't matter, but a genuine, unshakable, internally rooted sovereignty that no circumstance can revoke and no person can dismantle. You came into this video broken, or perhaps just searching for the confirmation that the fire inside you, the one that refused to go out even when everything around you turned to ash, was worth something. It is worth everything. Because that fire, disciplined by these principles, directed by this philosophy, and committed to the daily decision of becoming untouchable, that fire is exactly what the world's most powerful men were made of. So carry these 7 lessons not as inspiration that fades by tomorrow morning. Carry them as law. Live them as code. Apply them with the cold precision and the relentless consistency of a man who has decided, finally, completely, and without reservation, that he will never be broken by the same thing twice. The king is not crowned by others. He crowns himself. Through discipline, through silence, through patience, through reinvention, through mastery of his emotions, through the ruthless curation of his circle, and through the willingness to study his pain until it becomes his greatest weapon. That is the Machiavellian code. That is the hidden law, and now it belongs to you. Drop untouchable in the comments right now. That is your identity from this moment forward. Not broken, not searching. Untouchable. I want to see every single one of you claim that word below.